Leanne, I can't wait to dig in because I want you to know, and I don't know, you may know this as a podcast listener, but we were in speech for 7 years. So my baby B received services of many early interventions, and one being speech. And I was always fascinated when I would speak to his speech therapists, and they would look at things at whether it was the shape of his lips, whether they could like notice where his tongue was with certain words that I would be like, I don't see it. I don't see what you're talking about. But I was definitely one of those parents that were like, teach me what to do when I go home, because I'm here, every other day. But when I go home, I still want to continue what this is. Knowing that the people that I had in my kind of speech corner were just really, truthfully, some of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And I think that anybody who chooses a profession that is really to better other humans, it says a lot about you as a regular person. And now you're one of us. So you are a twinny mom. They are 5 months old. You, in your former life, were a speech pathologist. You pressed pause on this for a moment, but that has to play a role in what's happened with the development of the twinnies. And that is kind of where I want to dig in today, if you will allow it. And yes. I just want to know, so first of all, tell us about the babies.
So I have twin boys. Like you said, they're going to be 5 months this week. So gosh. I had them at 38 weeks. They were both 6 pounds, 11 ounces. Some big boys. Their names are Salvatore, and we call him Sal, and Joseph, and we call him Joey. So, they're pretty awesome. They're getting bigger, it seems like, by the day. Sometimes we wake them up in the morning and we're like, who is this baby? They just look different. But yeah, they're getting big and they're doing all kinds of different things. And now that I've kind of returned back to this planet after the first 3 months or so, I can be enjoying them. It was not pretty at first, but it's getting so much better. But I think that's pretty normal.
That's very normal. It's funny that despite the fact of how much we try to prepare for people of what's to come, there's no such thing. There's no way that you could be as prepared. Now, you had an interesting hospital experience, and it was a little, despite the fact that you had what we would say ginormous babies.
Yes.
Your entry wasn't as typical as you would think by having big babies at 38 weeks. So what happened with that?
So they wouldn't let me go past 38 weeks. So I was scheduled for an induction, went in for the induction, and the positions got kind of all wonky. So we went for C-section then after hours. And my baby B turned baby A. He didn't get all of the fluid out of his lungs. So he was in respiratory distress from the get-go. He was in the nursery at our small community hospital where we delivered the whole time. So we were never roomed, all of us together. So baby A turned baby B. Sal was with me the whole time. Joey was in the nursery. And then eventually they needed to do some different things with him that they couldn't do at that hospital. They had to send him an hour away to the NICU via helicopter. So then my husband went with him, and my other baby and I stayed at the hospital here before we got discharged, and we all went up to the NICU, and we could stay in a little family room from the Ronald McDonald House, sponsored across from the NICU in the building, which was amazing, so that I could, start pumping and getting that to Joey, who was in the NICU, and starting to feed Sal. And, all of that was just a huge, huge smack in the face. Just because, like you said, we get to this certain point when you think multiples, you're like, oh, they told me 35 weeks will be fine to stay at this hospital. So I'm like, oh, 35 weeks, we're going way past that. These babies are big. We're in the clear. And then it was like, oh, but it's still not going to be how you anticipated. So it was a very short stay. But
one of the dirtiest words that we could say as an expectant parent is should.
Yes.
Like, it's what should happen. It's like, no, we have no idea. The babies are going to make their own decisions, and we're just along for the ride. You're doing really good, actually. Look, 5 months.
Thank you.
You did it.
Yes.
See, it's such a different introduction of what we think should happen, but you make it through, right? And everybody's like,
That's
I'm
right.
sure people said to you a million times, I don't know, how you're doing it. And you're like,
Yeah.
what choice do you really
Right.
have?
Right. I don't know any different. So I think that's part of the perk of having twins first is that you don't know any different. This is just what we know.
Yeah, it's true. It
And it's
really is
awesome.
true. That's the lucky part. And that's, if for this whole few seasons of our Twiniversity podcast, I'm noticing that the majority of people I'm speaking to have like twins plus one. So first of
Mm.
all, warning. That's first thing that I want to say. Just gentle warning to you that just have the twins. But it's, if you never had, yes, like Leanne said, like if you've never had kids before, how the heck are you really supposed to know what's supposed to happen or what should happen? So with this all being said, when you were expecting, did your profession ever play a role in what you think should happen?
Yes, but more so, I would say, and this is just me being a worrier, I had a lot of concerns because of being a speech therapist. I do see plenty of children that were sets of multiples, had complications or were preterm, and they have a variety of disabilities or delays. And so I was concerned that, what if in a variety of forms? So yes, that's always been kind of played a role in my mind of what's going to happen once they're here, or once they're first born. And what actually did happen was nothing that ever was on my radar.
Yeah.
But yes, it's in a lot of ways, even as watching them grow, I'm still thinking of that from that perspective.
So when you were in the hospital and you had your one baby, and then our other baby decided to start getting their frequent flyer miles early.
Right. Yes,
I
that's
hope
what
we
we
get
tell them.
miles for those. That would have
Mhm.
been, we really should. There should be like triple miles for that first
Yeah.
flight. Did you think to yourself like, oh, I know that I have to try to, feed them this way, or I need to do this? And then were you worried that you weren't having that done with the other baby? And you're like, okay, now did you go into a full spiral?
Yes. I mean, full spiral is basically my name. One small thought spirals very quickly. My husband is a very good man. Yes. So Sal was with me, and breastfeeding was the plan all along. So we started trying all of that with him. They had great lactation consultants at our hospital, came to see me frequently, and knowing my situation and knowing I was about to go off the rails at any moment, they were in there all the time. So Sal, I actually think they confused him a little bit more because we tried the nipple shield, we tried the SNS feeder thing, we tried, so many things that just were crazy now looking back. And he also had a lip and tongue tie. So we were, in a host of things working in a different way toward us. And then also my milk wasn't coming in right away. Of course, I had a C-section too. So that's another part of it. So by the time we left the hospital, just Sal and I, he was just doing a little bit of formula to supplement. I was still working on getting my milk in, and Joey had started because he was intubated for his transport, and then they did have a feeding tube in him, and more speech therapy things in my mind going through that with feeding tubes and intubation. But they had started to give him a few bottles of formula as well. But then once my milk started coming in, I would nurse Sal, pump. My husband would run it across to Joey's room to give him the little, 5 mLs, 10 mLs that I would get at that time. And Joey actually just kind of latched right on. And I think it was maybe because he didn't get all those other crazy things that were confusing him at the time. So once we left, I did kind of just jump right into tandem nursing and worked that out somehow. And Sal was on a nipple shield for a while, but then got his lip and tongue tie. Because of being a speech therapist, I'm always thinking down the road, well, I see plenty of 3-year-olds that have lip and tongue ties that could have been remediated early and they're not speaking. So I wanted to get that taken care of right away, which did end up helping his nursing. And he's been great since about 6 weeks. So in my mind, a variety of things were going through. how are they going to get enough? How am I going to, produce enough? Are they going to be able to latch? Are they going to be able to just nurse like that? Are we going to have to switch to, all kinds of thoughts? But then on the other side, as far as Joey being intubated and then having a feeding tube, in my mind, working also with adults in acute care, when they're intubated, they're not swallowing for a long portion of time. So I'm worried about the swallowing aspect of it, which is a large part of what I do as a speech therapist as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then, again, that spiral went in so many different directions that I could probably go on for hours. So I don't know if I even answered your question with all of that.
No, you totally did, because you're very, very, very hyper aware and hypersensitive to every little thing that happens in the beginning, because you're like, if we don't fix this, I'm going to see this again later.
Yes.
So could we talk about lip and tongue tie for a second?
Sure.
So statistically, I know that nationwide in the US, we're looking at about 4% of newborns have a diagnosed lip and tongue tie. However, I also see that sometimes it is way over diagnosed.
Yes.
So Leanne, how would we know, like, what could we do as parents? Like, how, I don't even know where I want to go with this, because I want to say, how did you know that you had a lip and tongue tie, right? That's my part A. And then part B is, what could somebody look for that may actually be a real lip and tongue tie?
So I knew it kind of from what I was seeing, but at that time, my brain was so foggy for so many reasons that I wasn't necessarily looking at it with those objective eyes. One of the lactation consultants did say, I think he's got a little bit of a lip and tongue tie. And then I kind of perseverated on it and was obsessed with getting it fixed. So I saw it, thought it looked a little suspicious. Then when they said so, and he wasn't latching like I had anticipated, then I was like, okay, we've got something here. Whether he would have just kind of progressed on his own and not needed the nipple shield and, made those changes without getting the remediation, who knows? But like I said, I was thinking about language development and speech development later down the road that I wanted to avoid if we could at this point, or at that point, I wanted to avoid it early. So if I would say, if a new mom is told that by a lactation consultant, or they're having trouble latching, first of all, see a lactation consultant. If they're having trouble with that baby, just get it checked out. So we went to the pediatric dentist just for the consult. They said, we do the consult. If we feel like it's necessary, we'll do it and do the remediation. If not, we don't feel like, we don't do it just because there's nothing to do. So I would say just always get more opinions. I wasn't going to just stop until I felt like I was being heard and not getting an answer if there was no answer, but getting what I felt like needed to be done. And they did definitely see it. And we kind of talked about it, knowing what I was looking at from my clinical perspective, felt very comfortable with moving toward that remediation. And then he did make a lot of progress.
Yeah. Was it a lip or tongue or both?
Both.
It was both.
So it was the top lip and then the under the tongue.
Okay. All right. And so for those of you that are listening and you're like, what does this mean? Your lips are really important in breastfeeding because you have to get a really good seal. And so it should actually be almost like the wet part of the inside of the lip that's touching your skin. And for their tongue, what people also forget is that breastfeeding is not, they're not using your nipple as a straw. They're actually shaping your nipple, and then milk just wonderfully shoots out. It's quite remarkable, the biology of breastfeeding. But if you couldn't flex your tongue in a certain way, or you couldn't purse your lips in a certain way, it could really have a detrimental effect on a latch. And of course, if you have a bad latch, then you're not going to have a good feed. And then it does turn into the Pandora's box of, what do I do now? So it's important.
And looking back, I can see how different he fed at that time, because even with the shield, he would leak so much.
Yeah.
Or it would be in the shield, or then without it, he would just have it all over his mouth and it would just be everywhere, because he wasn't getting that good latch. And then also, I think he had some oral motor weakness,
Mhm.
which is another speech therapy thing that I was looking at, because he just didn't have a great seal and his lips were kind of always like pursed at first until he
Yeah.
kind of built that strength up.
So when you finally got to Joey and you were finally able to breastfeed, did you do anything different knowing that he's now a little bit behind the eight ball here? Or were you just like, nope, we're just going to pretend that yesterday didn't exist?
As far as nursing for both of them, I kind of did it the same, because Sal couldn't go back into his room with us, but I would nurse Sal first and then run over to nurse Joey, trying to pump in between just to give them whatever else would come out. But Joey just never had an issue. He just went right with it. So I didn't really feel like I had to try to catch him up. And we joke now still that he's just our just eater, because he's just a thick, solid guy. And he's just our little, he's going to eat. So I think he just from the get-go was like, yeah, I'm ready to eat, Mom. Like, let's do it. And Sal just needed a little bit of extra help. So as far as changing anything Joey did, I didn't really have to, because he just naturally did it a little bit better on his own.
See, so that's a point that I really want everybody to pay attention to, that Leanne just said, that despite the fact that you would think that Joey would have more issues because he's the one that received more interventions, that's not the case, because there is no should. So you would think that, oh, here we go, intubation, feeding tube, the whole 9 yards. It doesn't matter. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't make a prediction on these things.
And even that early, how different they are. Because in my mind, especially when it came to sleeping there at the beginning, I was like, why aren't they doing the same things? Because my husband would have to remind me so many times, they're two different people. And I'm like, but they just should do the same thing. So it just goes to show, at 5 days old, one was doing something and the other was doing something else.
That's it. They're just two dudes that have the same birthday.
Yeah.
And shared their first apartment before they were born.
Yeah. They don't look anything alike either. So that makes it even funnier.
That's the way that it goes, man. It's so interesting. Okay. So now fast forward, here we are 5 months. This is usually the time that people may have a conversation with their pediatrician about worries about feeding. So I can't even remember. To be honest with you, Leanne, I don't think that my pediatrician thought anything was up. And I remember saying, I'm going rogue. I'm just going rogue. And in our state that we have, I could call. So in New York State, by the way, for all my New Yorkers listening, you could just call 311, which is like our generic municipal number in New York City, and say, I'd like to have an evaluation. So you could do that independently without the support of my pediatrician. So, or in spite, how about that? In spite of my support of the pediatrician. And then once I had that, I went to the pediatrician and basically was like, I told you that something was going on. But I don't feel bad about that. My pediatrician didn't see it. It was just that your pediatrician's with your babies for a minimal amount of time, and they're looking for factors that are way beyond things that we're going to see in our regularly scheduled day. So knowing that, if somebody is, what are some things that people could look for that they may be concerned about in the first 5 months, in the first 6 months, even in the first year, that would cause them to go rogue if their pediatrician did not think this was cause for concern?
So when we're thinking about speech therapy, we could think of a lot of different things. One of them being speech production. So how we talk and how sounds are sounding. So aside from all the swallowing stuff that we just talked about, or feeding stuff that we just talked about, keep an eye out for if they're dribbling a lot, more than what you would consider typical. If you don't feel like they're getting a good seal around a bottle or a nipple, that kind of thing as far as feeding. But for language, at this point, we want to start, really hearing some of that babbling or not babbling with sounds necessarily yet. And when I say sounds, I mean consonants, M's, B's, P's, N's. You're not really going to hear that consistently, purposefully yet, but hearing them making some of those little noises and as if they're just talking, quote unquote, to you. And hearing them do that or attending to sounds, because that's more of a receptive language thing. So if you are like, I notice my babies now, if I say their name, they look, and it's not that they are understanding what their name is receptively, but they're hearing something and turning to that sound and understanding, if I look towards this sound, I'm going to see what it is. So a lot of those hearing receptive language type of things you want to be looking for as well. But really just making sure that they are making noises. So a lot of things that I tell parents to refer to are on the American Speech and Hearing Association website, ASHA.org. And on there, you'll see some developmental milestones for speech and language that you want to keep an eye out for. So at this point, just really listening to make sure they're saying some different sounds, not consonants, but making those noises.
So if we don't notice noises, what do we do? Do we say something to the pediatrician? And what if the pediatrician, and now this is with your mom hat on, what if we do go to the pediatrician and say, listen, I'm really concerned. I've noticed that Joey's not doing this. And the pediatrician's like, well, you know what? Let's keep an eye on it. Let's not worry about it. Am I under a timer here? Or can I wait another 30 days to see what happens?
At this point, at 5 months, yes, you can wait. I typically, as far as language development, will say right around that year mark, if you're not hearing a variety of attempted words, attempted consonant vowel combinations, then we start kind of looking into some different things. And a lot of pediatricians will wait until 18 months even, or 2 years. Now as a mom, and I've always said this even before I was a mom, to just trust your gut. If you feel like something's wrong, just keep seeking something until you get some help. If you feel like you need some help, or if even you just do an evaluation with a speech therapist, just get their perspective on it, because they very well may not need anything. And then, or they say, let's wait 3 more months. And then, sometimes, this development is a range, any development is a range. So, and you may have very well seen with boy-girl twins, how differently your girl developed compared to your boy.
Holy smoke. It was like a documentary on how humans evolve. It was embarrassing for my dude, right? Because she was like, but he was so mobile. And so they were both just so different at different times. And I never expected that. But I think where the fault lies is the should, because when I saw how she was speaking, I was immediately comparing him and then saying, oh my gosh, like we're in so much trouble here. What's going on? It was really, really concerning. So I appreciate that you were like, okay, yeah, we could wait a year and you could look at this. And like you said about Sal and Joey, that they're just 2 different people, and they're going to evolve differently. Now, are you doing anything different on a daily basis? And I think about this and I'm laughing already because the odds of you not doing something different are very slim. But I know when I speak to people that are like preschool teachers, they already are like, no, like this is what we're doing. We already have like a homeschool curriculum at 8 months. Because you have your speech therapy glasses on, are you doing anything different with the dudes that maybe you would say, this is definitely overkill, but I'm doing it?
Yes. So I have a friend that comes over usually on Tuesday mornings, and she has a little girl about a month younger than my twins. And I'm sitting there going over one of those, it's like a color popper thing. And I'm like saying like, okay, here we have pink, press and, pop. And I'm having them like do a hand over hand thing to pop it out. I'm going over the colors, going over the days of the week, going over the date every day. We read books every day. We're, of course, plenty of parents are doing some of these things, but I do look back at the day and I'm like, yeah, they definitely needed to go over the date today. I'm sure they're remembering, so my friend, what I was getting at, my friend was like, only kids of a speech pathologist and a school psychologist are going to be doing this at 4 months or 5 months old. So yes, I mean, it's just my instinct, I think. And I think sometimes I look and I'm like, I'm just sitting here doing therapy all day for free, and it's awesome because I do have this perspective that I hope is helping them in the long run, that they're just getting so infused with language in every different aspect of our day. And I also, I don't know if you watch The Office, but okay, so Jan, you know how she sings. I find myself doing that every minute of the day. And I'm like, these people are going to just be, I don't know, singers or in musicals or something, because everything we do, I'm just singing and narrating. But that's what I always tell parents to do. So it's interesting to see that it just has come naturally to me after I've told parents to do this for years and years and years. But yes, I think there are plenty of things that I'm doing like, this is overkill, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway, because I don't even think about it. It just comes out.
Well, because you're so used to doing it for your 8 hours a day and, seeing a bazillion different kiddos. Do you think that being a parent is going to change the way that you see patients?
Probably, yes, in some ways, because I do recall some things that I would be telling parents to do. Because you had a PT on here. I don't know if it was years. I just went back in the archives, or if it was recently. I can't remember. But she was talking about how she would tell parents never to put your children in the swings or the containers, and now she's like, yeah, okay, like that was very unrealistic. So yeah, you see some things that are like totally unrealistic. But as far as language, most of it is very realistic, because it's very you're just narrating your day. You're just talking. You're just, showing them different parts of language every day. But we'll see what things I would recommend as far as feeding once my kids start eating solids here in a little bit. So,
oh, that's going to be fun. Now, how are you going to do this right at 5 months? Are you starting sooner than the 6 months? Are you starting with, less purees, more kind of chunky things? What's going to be your method specifically for the dudes?
I'm planning to do baby-led weaning. So I'm planning right at 6 months, the recommendation is once they can sit up unassisted. Yeah. And we're big eaters around here. We love to cook and try different foods. And that's always been a goal of ours, is that they'll have, diversity in what they eat. So we're going to see how that goes in a little bit and start with whatever we eat, they eat. That's the intent.
Are you going to cut it differently? Do you have a plan? Like, how big are these chunks going to be for you? Because there's so many people that read so many things on baby-led weaning, right? So this is one of those diverse topics right now.
Right.
How are you going to do this? So let's say you're going to make chicken and you're making are you going to still broil it for them? Are you going to boil it so that it's a little like not as
softer?
What are you going to do for that?
I haven't really thought about meats too much yet. I'm reading through a book to try and make sure I have everything, in line for when I start. So mostly the size is it'll be a learning process for us all, and it might be a hybrid of different things. But as far as, I'm just going to really let them explore for a while too. And I think that's a big part of it that is missed when we're thinking about introducing foods, is that we're trying to just, push a spoon in or give them something. But that exploration is so big in learning that they can start to experience that and enjoy it for themselves. So I don't really have an answer yet, because check back with me once I get there.
But that's really I'm fascinated by this, because as a new parent, you're going to have that experience. And then this is really like a case study almost that's going to be happening in your home.
Yes.
These poor kids.
I know. I say that so many times. These poor kids.
These poor kids. Now, I always remembered that when we were going through the process of speech and everything else, one of the very weird things that bizarrely comforted me was knowing that Albert Einstein was a late talker. Probably the most historical late talker that everybody, assumed. When you have a baby that's a late talker, you automatically assume the worst. And clearly, I have a shirt that I bought for him, and he must have been 3, that said, even Einstein was a late talker, because I just got so
Cute.
frustrated with
Mhm.
people saying, why isn't he speaking? And I'm like, what do you want me to tell you? Like, how do I
Right.
know when
Right.
he's going to say something? I, to this day, will tell you that I really think it's because my daughter didn't shut up. And so how is this kid going to say anything? And now, of course, they're, 17. My son speaks so eloquently and so thoughtfully. And when he speaks, it's with purpose, where my daughter will speak to hear her own voice. It's,
Another difference you probably saw between boys and girls, I think.
I couldn't believe it. I really, because they would be in the stroller, and people would be like, oh my gosh, are they twins? And she'd be like, yes. And then she'd be like, that's Johnny, or, I'm Anna. And like, who asked you, little girl? Who asked
I
you?
just
No one
listened to the
asked.
episode where you were saying that she thought he was her son.
This is
And
really sad and horrible and true.
that made me laugh so hard. Poor thing.
She really did. She really was very devastated to find out that she wasn't a mother. She thought she was responsible for him. And I don't know. I think, like, was it because he was always in therapy and that we would go as a team? And so she saw me as her equal, where he
Yeah.
was like in school. So of course now I'm like wearing a hat of like Twiniversity person, plus, what did former Nat do, or how would I have done things different? I don't know if I really would have done anything different, because you gotta roll with it, right? Like every day, that's just what happens. Oh my gosh, Leanne, this is so fascinating. But with the whole Einstein being a late talker thing, what do you see in the kids that you've worked with? Is it just a phenomenon that occurs? Is it something that could change? Are you waiting for a switch to turn on internally for those kids? What do you do? Like, yeah, they can make sounds, but it's not conversational. What do you say to those parents?
So this is one of those things that is so cool about early intervention. So the kids that I see typically are around 16 to 18 months. And they're maybe saying a few words, just very basic. They're not putting words together, that just very minimal output. And so, we do therapy, and then you start to see this progress. And then sometimes it's just like a snap, it just snaps, and they're just like, okay, I got it. And they just go off. And so that's one of the things about early intervention that's so neat, is that they sometimes need the therapy, of course, but it's just development at their own rate. And that's it's a fine line. So that's why early intervention is awesome, because it kind of just gives them that little push that maybe it would have taken a little bit longer without the therapy. But it's really neat in hindsight too, because I have, when you work with kids at that age and you see them for 3-4 years, you become family with them and their parents, and their siblings are in there, and the siblings are, born sometimes in the time of you seeing them for therapy. Like, you just get to know them very well. And so I still keep in touch with a lot of the families that I've discharged even years ago. And the moms will send me videos, and they'll be like, well, now look what my son is doing because of you. And they're like saying the F word or something. Like, well, I didn't teach them that, but they're speaking. So awesome. So it's really neat in hindsight to see the progress that they're making because of this early intervention. And that's why, going back to what parents can do, if you feel like something is off, just get started. Usually insurance is covering some of it. Usually there is some type of assistance there. I have a twin mom that I've become closer friends with now that I have twins, but I saw her twins years ago when they were about 15 months old, and they're in kindergarten now. But we just met up, and she was a teacher before she had them. And she said, I knew it was too early for what insurance would say, but I knew that they needed something. So I would I got them in early, and I was just one of those moms that just, went early. So I always think the earlier, the better. If you have a concern, just get started and see what happens.
And there's different chunks of it. So you have, each state has different programs, but there's one program that's for like newborns that receive
Mhm.
services. And then there's different increments. And I don't really know how different it would be, because there's like the under 3 crowd, and then you have the over
Mhm.
3 crowd, and then it evolves to yet something else later on. But if you decide almost too late, I want to say, this is why I would recommend people call sooner than later. It's because sometimes if you didn't have early intervention, your insurance is less likely to cover something later on down the line. However, if you saw, if you could prove that this has been an ongoing situation and we need continuous support with it, they're more likely to cover it. Because I found that we had a Twiniversity family that was looking for speech therapy for a middle schooler, and the only way the insurance would cover it is if they were born with a cleft palate or were in a car accident.
So many weird. Some of the insurances will only cover if there's a diagnosis of autism or
Yeah,
a brain injury. So I don't know where they get
I don't
these,
either.
like
It's
why that
crazy.
one was only those two diagnoses, that one
Yeah.
was only those. It really is kind of crazy. But yes, the earlier they broaden their spectrum of diagnoses that they'll
Yeah.
accept.
And it was free for us. Like there was nothing at all. I never got a bill. I never saw nothing. And Leanne, I actually was just messaging one of my son's therapists the other day on Instagram, because her son now is 5, and she was a baby, I say, when she was with us, and her name was Natasha, but my son couldn't say it. So he called her Matasha. And so then we all just called her Matasha.
Natasha.
And
Yeah.
even my mom to this day would say, "How's Matasha doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let's check her. Let's look her up on Instagram."
So
But
cute.
it's wonderful. And I also still go back to Matasha and the gang if I need something for a Twiniversity mom. I
Yeah.
have no shame. I will call somebody,
Yes.
Leanne, by the way, you're gonna be so sick of me. You're gonna be like, ugh,
I'm so
that's
glad. Yeah, this is awesome. One of the moms of a little boy that I worked with for a few years was the nurse delivering my babies. I mean, she's
that's
amazing. So,
perfect.
what more family bond can you have?
You can't. You really can't. It's so beautiful. So now, 5 months, we're going into baby-led weaning. What are the other big milestones that you're looking for? Like, do you have a calendar set that says, I need to check this at this date? I'm worried
Surprisingly,
that
no. But
Joey
now
isn't
that you
saying
say that,
S's.
I was gonna say, now that you say that, I'm gonna have to do it. No, the next thing is I'll be starting to listen for some of those consonant
Mhm.
babbles. Like I hear some of them a little bit. They're not purposeful yet, but hearing them do some of those M's and N's and maybe a B in a couple months or something like that.
Mhm.
That's what I'll start listening for next. But I'm also really, they're starting to notice one another.
Mm.
And so they'll lay there and smile a little bit or like reach out for each other. So I'm really listening for them kind of doing the little bit of noises and coos toward one another, just for that kind of social language back and forth.
I can melt. I could literally
Yes.
melt. Are you loving it? How do you feel that you were a twin mom 5 months in, looking back? How are
It
you
is just absolutely amazing. I mean, we waited for these babies for a long, long time, as I know a lot of the listeners have. So we went through IUI. So tomorrow is actually the day that we found out they were both coming last year. So it's really, really just a huge blessing. It's just so amazing to see them and see them grow and develop. It's like better than I could have ever imagined.
I'd love to hear that. I know we have a
Because at
lot of
first, like I said, at first it was not, I was like, what have we done? This is, this is, they need to go back. Like, this is not going to work. So now it's wonderful.
Oh, Leanne, I'm so happy. I really am. I'm so happy for you. And I say poor boys, but they're so lucky. They really are. And it's
Thank
to
you.
have such, a mom that's not only going to be, an amazing, loving mom, but you're going to have that skill set. And I appreciate that you're sharing it with us too, because we're
Oh, thank
gonna,
you.
listen, you can't get rid of me now.
I'm
Honestly,
so
you
glad.
should
This
have
is
never put that in your
wonderful.
bio. That should have never been there. And for those of you that are listening, know that when guests come on the Twiniversity podcast, we usually have a topic. However, I'm going to say 52% of the times I decide to change it right before I hit record.
I love it.
This is the way that we have to do it, because we are so fortunate to have such a really good community, and we could help each other grow. And I'm so honored that you even knew who we were, Leanne. Like, truthfully.
My husband found you. I will give him that shout out. So when we found out that we were having two, he got your book. And then we started watching your YouTube videos of, week by week pregnancy updates and stuff like that. So
I can't believe that. And look, and here we are.
Here
and
we
now
are.
you're going to be like, I'm babe. Why did you look her up? I'm sick of her. She's
No,
calling
I'm
me
so
again
glad.
to help with
I'm so glad.
another twin family.
I'm so glad, really, anytime. I'm glad to do it.
Oh, Leanne, I love you so much. Thank you so much. You stay right there. And for those of you that are listening, know that this is not the end of our story, as I say so many times, because there is so much more to learn and so much more to do and so many more ways that we could help you at Twiniversity. So head on over to Twiniversity. If you literally just put the word speech in the little magnifying glass search bar, you will get a ton of articles that have to do with early intervention and speech, because it is very common in our Twinnie universe. I mean, it's actually really common in the world. I just think we talk about it a lot more in Twinnies. And it's not just because your babies are early, or because your babies were in the NICU, or because your babies took their first flight, at a few hours old. Everybody is different, but we really are so lucky that people share their stories with us. And so if you need inspiration, or you're anxious about something, go see what another parent did. If you're like, I don't know what to do, you don't have to say that. You could literally go see what other people did and then choose which way is going to work best for you, because that's what we're really here for at Twiniversity. And if you do not find what you're looking for, just email us at community@twiniversity.com. We are so easy to find. It's ridiculous. You could also find us on any social media platform, literally every single one of them. We're just at Twiniversity on everything. Some people call it branding. I did not know that. I was like, I have a great name that, by the way, didn't exist before Twiniversity. This is not a real word, yet Alexa, I can't say her name because you know who she is, but she now knows what Twiniversity is. And that is how I feel like, okay, we're getting there now. Now we're making progress as a twin community. I'm really excited. So you have more of our podcast, you have our website, you have our socials, you have us directly. And the first of the month, we have a Twiniversity meetup. And Leanne does not know this, but I will be asking her to be a speaker at our Twiniversity meeting. So it's like I said, Leanne, it's too late now, my friend. There's no turning back. It's literally in my notes. Speaker meeting. So every first of the month, we have a meeting with great guest speakers like Leanne. You never know who's going to be there, but it is also run by a twin-specific lactation consultant, social worker, one of my best friends of all times, twin mom, of course, plus 2 singletons. So you are in good company over there. So hopefully we'll see you. And if you, go to our YouTube, blah, 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 all that jazz. But most of all, if you do something, like and subscribe to this podcast, because it's all about the algorithm lately. I could have the best stuff, but nobody's going to find it unless we're deemed worthy by the Apples or the Googles. So by subscribing and liking and even reviewing, I would be humbly appreciative. And everybody says, how could we give back to you, Nat, for all that you've done? That's the way that you could give back, is just leave a review. So if you got a few seconds, take them for me today. I would appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed today's episodes, and I will see you before you know it. So have the best day ever, and see you later, alligators. Thanks for listening.